Soim tosim olecha melech. The mitzvah in this week's Parsha Shoftim, to appoint a king, is a mitzvah which has been debated at many different levels throughout all the Meforshim, exactly what the nature of this mitzvah is, whether it's an obligation or whether it's a concession to human weakness. Whatever it is, it's certainly considered to be part and parcel of the establishment of Klal Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael. There's no question that the appointment of first Shaul HaMelech and later on David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech was central to the whole establishment of the Jewish people in the land of Israel. And indeed, in our daily tefillos, we daven es tzemach David avdecha me'er tatzmiach. Part of our concept of the Geula is the re-establishment of Malchus Yisrael. What's interesting here, though, is that the establishment of the king is considered to be one of three mitzvahs, which are really a sequence of mitzvahs which were vital for establishing the Jewish people in the land of Israel. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu is dealing with in these parshas. He's preparing them for imminently entering the land of Israel. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Kaf reads as follows: Sholosh mitzvos nitztavu Yisrael b'shas knisoson be'eretz Yisrael. There are three mitzvahs that they were commanded. Of course, they were commanded dozens of mitzvahs, but there are three which are connected to each other, which link together to create, if you like, the core of the re-establishment of the Jewish people in the land of Israel. The first one is limnos lahem melech. The first one is to appoint a king. And the Rambam in Hilchos Melachim, it's interesting actually that the Rambam in his Mishnah Torah, so it's a 14-volume codification of halacha, and volume 14 is called Sefer Shoftim. He uses the word Shoftim from this week's Parsha as the name of the whole volume, and the final section of that volume is Hilchos Melachim, is the halacha of appointing a king, the duty of the king, the restrictions about kings, and how the kings fought battles. All this is the final part of the Rambam's magnificent magnum opus of the Mishnah Torah, and he ends with 2 chapters about the Melech HaMashiach, that the Mashiach also he includes in Hilchos Melachim. So this is not a trivial issue, this is not a small matter, this is at the heart of the past, present, and future of the Jewish people. What were the three mitzvahs which were all connected to each other? So the Rambam starts Hilchos Melachim with these words. He quotes verbatim from the Gemara in Sanhedrin. 3 mitzvahs Klal Yisrael were instructed when they came into Eretz Yisrael. The first one was limnos lahem melech, as it says in Shoftim, Soim tosim olecha melech. The second one was mechias Amalek, the destruction of Amalek, which is in next week's Parsha in Kiseitze. And then Binyan Beis HaMikdash, the establishment of the Beis HaMikdash, B'makom asher yivcha Hashem Elokecha, in the specially appointed place, the building of the sanctuary, of the temple, and that is mentioned in last week's Parsha. So between these three Parshas, between Re'ei, Shoftim, Kiseitze, we have these 3 mitzvahs. The Shichno Sidrushu V'oso Shama in last week's Parsha, says the Rambam at the beginning of Hilchos Melachim, is the mitzvah to build the Beis HaMikdash. It's a mitzvah saseh, but you can't do that until you first get rid of Amalek, and you can't do that until you first have a king. So there's a sequence here of 3 mitzvahs. And this is a very powerful subject about which a fair amount has been written, and gives us really a key into understanding the dynamics of the life of Shaul HaMelech and David HaMelech in many different ways. What's interesting is, on a personal level, these parshas are always read in Chodesh Ellul. And the month of Ellul is always a month of preparation, a time of Cheshbon HaNefesh, a time of self-examination, a time of resolution for self-improvement. That is the nature of Ellul as a preparation for the Yom HaDin, preparation for the Yom HaDin of Rosh Hashanah and the Yom HaKodesh of Yom Kippur. And this is always read at this time of the year. So the Meforshim here say, and I'm reading Rav Tzadok HaKohen particularly, I'm following, but Nasiva Shalom also speaks about it, that actually these 3 mitzvahs represent not only on a national level how to establish the Jewish people, but also on a personal level. He says what's happening here is, the first thing is limnos lahem melech, to appoint a king. That is Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the day of Malchus Shamayim. HaMelech HaKadosh and HaMelech HaMishpat all begins on Rosh Hashanah, and the whole shofar blowing is connected to the proclamation of Hashem Melech, Hashem Molech, and that is really Malchus Yisrael, to accept the idea that we are Avdei HaMelech, that we are servants of the king. This is Rosh Hashanah and has to be, if you like, renewed every year. So Limnos Lahem Melech is not only something that happened on a national level, but at this time of year also Rosh Hashanah is represented in that first halacha. The second stage of Mechias HaMolek, so also on a personal level, means Aseres Meitshuva, means somehow getting rid of the negativity in one's life. Everybody has certain weaknesses and certain negative tendencies of one sort or another, and while we can't get rid of them completely, but every Aseret Yemei Tshuva, we make a small effort to do Tshuva. What does Tshuva mean? Tshuva means, in a word, self-improvement. To be able to identify areas where we need to improve ourselves, whether it's in the quality of our spiritual life, of our davening, of our learning, of our tzedakah and chesed, whether it's in our care to avoid speaking Lashon Hara, doing Aveiros of one sort or another. There is a wide spectrum of areas in which a person, every human being, has certain weaknesses, and Aseres Yemei Tshuva is, in a sense, on a personal level, Mechias HaMolek, it's getting rid of the negativity in one's life. And then Yom Kippur is Binyan Beis HaMikdash. Yom Kippur is the day that we enter into the Kodesh Kadoshim, we enter into a day of complete Kedusha, and having acclaimed the Melech and having resolved to get rid of the negativity in our life, we are able to enter into the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore we find that, interestingly, these three mitzvahs on a national level also have an application on a personal level. And that is really if you like, a goal for us during the month of Ellul, to prepare ourselves mentally and spiritually in order to go through this particular this process. In actual fact, the Shloah HaKadosh says that the phrase that we use at the beginning of every Shemona Esra, Melech, Oizer, Umoshia, Umogein, those four words are to be understood as follows: that Melech is a reference to Rosh Hashanah. Oizer, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps us, is Aseres Yemei Tshuva, where there's a special spiritual assistance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us in the tshuva process. Moshiach is Yom Kippur, is the day of Yeshua, day of salvation. And Mogein, he says, Mogein, the protection, is a reference to the Sukkah. The schach of the Sukkah is the Mogein. So Melech, Ozer, Moshiach, Mogein, says the Shloah HaKadosh, is the core of every year. That this period of time, right, these few weeks, during which we go through the Malchus, the Cheshbon HaNefesh, and the Binyan Beis HaMikdash, this, on a personal level, really is the core of the spiritual growth of every member of Klal Yisrael. I'd just like to end up with a very beautiful story which touched me, connected with the fact that we're saying at the moment, L'Dovid Hashem Ori V'Yishi, Tehillim chapter 27. Everybody knows that we say that regularly, morning and evening, a most beautiful mizmor, Achas Sha'alti Meis Hashem Osa Abakesh, speaking about that we are surrounded by our enemies, but we're not afraid of them. All we are focused on is really connecting with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there's a very beautiful story, which is, in these months of terrible sadness and terrible destruction, sometimes there are little glimpses of light. And this is one of them I want to share with you just very briefly. Actually, last month I was with a group of people who went to visit near Gaza, and one of the towns we visited was a place called Nir Oz. Nir Oz, a kibbutz that was completely devastated and burnt out, and at the moment it's a ghost town of burnt towns. And they went, these butchers and these terrorists went from house to house, slaughtering people and setting fire to the houses, and they kidnapped a few people as well. So one of the people they kidnapped was a young woman in her 20s called Sapir. And this is the story that she tells, because she was actually part of the hostage deal that was made. She was in captivity for 55 days, and then she was released. And she tells this story, and you can find it on YouTube. If you want to look for it and hear it firsthand in Ivrit, you can. But the story is I found it very touching. She said about a month before the 7th of October, she wasn't feeling well, and she was advised by somebody that she should say every day a perek of Tehillim. And when she asked which perek, somebody told her, say perek 27, Adavar Hashem Orev Yishi. So every day she's saying this chapter of Tehillim. She's not a what we would call a religious girl, but she's a traditional girl. Saying Tehillim meant something to her. Halfway through, she suddenly realized, why am I saying this chapter of Tehillim? It's not about a refuah shalema at all. It's about enemies who are coming, lechalas besori, coming to eat me alive and surrounding me and wanting to kill me. And I won't be afraid because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with me, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is my mo'oz chayai, the strength of my life. But nevertheless, she says it every day. Anyhow, what happens is, Nebuch, she is tragically taken into captivity, and she is in captivity. Who knows what conditions she's living under? But every day, several times, she says, I kept my sanity by saying this perek of Tehillim. So here's this young lady in captivity in the darkness of these tunnels saying, L'Dovid Hashem Ori V'Yishi, this HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the light of my life. Every day she's saying that. And at one point she said that the man who was in charge of her captivity came in to where she was, and he said to her, look, you're my enemy and I hate you, but I must confess that every time I come in here, you radiate light. That's what he said to her. She was absolutely taken aback by that. But she said, Davar Hashem Orev Yishi kept me sane, kept me focused, and was a miraculous connection for me. And having come out of that, she feels that she was saved by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by the Yad Hashem. So even though we're in the times of darkness, there are little elements of life and light that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends to us. And Bez Hashem, we should be zeicher to see that light, and we should see the kedusha of Rosh Hashanah coming towards us. We should illuminate our life for the whole year, a year of only bracha, v'atzlacha, and geula v'yeshua. Amen.